Hi, I'm Daniel. Welcome back to the channel. And for the purposes of this video, I did not go to Emory. I went to DeKalb College when I took the class, but the lecture was at Emory. This is my second take on this one. I forgot my water for the first one. This video is going to be about the history behind my functional training concept. There were several historical things that came together that helped me to blend this with current hit philosophy. The update, I wanted to let y'all know I got the critical factors for skill and performance. No, the dance, music and dance one. I got the update. I got extra. I got them all. Yeah, I got all the articles that were necessary, and I've compared as best I can. The only thing I think I missed out on, the only thing I I can look at and see is clinically controlled environment. That could be changed. That could be it would be an unnecessary change. It's just no, that's not how the concept was. It would be kind of useless. Um, but so it's anyway. It's a concept. It's not. Here's my new program. That's no. That's not a thing. My idea was to use the rules. We'll just say rules provided and develop a plan to enhance human performance. Simple, very simple. Um, so, how this started. When I was at DeKalb College, I believe it was 85 or 86, no, 80, 86, 86. Okay, somewhere around there. Um, I was taking a class called Developmental Psychology, basically child psychology. And one of the parts I was doing for, research papers and research projects and all that kind of stuff, I was learning about the phases of skill development from infancy to the thing about object permanence, how they start turning their head, raising head, raising the body, all those developmental stages. I was trying to learn about that. And the one key thing that, as both a gymnast and someone starting to learn about exercise, that was probably when I first got my very first Darden Nautilus book, the Nautilus Advanced Bodybuilding book. I got the other one after that. So I was in that class. We were talking about the stage in infancy where um, when a child is starting to learn to stand up on its own. It's sitting, started, it's, trying to get into position to move and stand up. Many parents make the mistake of not letting their child fall. And by that, and if people who are talking know about this, back me up either, or tell me where I'm wrong, please. Um, that may be a key point I need to reconsider in my strategy. But my understanding is that is a serious developmental stage for problem solving and skill development, and potentially for the confidence, the confidence of the skill. Children will usually fall several times, but it is very important that they problem solve and develop their own confidence of being able to get and stand up and, hey, look at it, that's how it goes. But many parents will, right before the kid starts to fall, they'll run in and grab them. Don't do that. Unless, just get your hand near their head in case it gets close. But let them fall. Let them fall. Let them see it's going to be okay. Or let them see it has consequences, just not too serious. I'm part of the problem here too, I guess. Anyway, So I went to a lecture at. It took me a while to remember because I thought it was online for a while, but it was at Emory. Um, the lecture was about historical records of royalty, historical records of nobility, historical records going many different cultures, Asian cultures, European cultures, uh, Viking cultures, Arabic cultures, any culture that had royalty or nobility. They had a very similar issue. In almost all these cultures, not all, almost all, there is a lineage, father, first son, to possessions, to riches, to it was just a worldwide thing for a while. Kind of still is, but it's slowly fading. So, in the okay, here you go. Imagine this: king, Western country, even a comparable Eastern country, or an emperor, doesn't matter, is firstborn son. This creature carries around the generations of that imperial lineage. What do you think they're going to do? That guy has some seeds that father wants to make sure is properly handled. So, almost all cultures were very watchful, very careful with uh, what we would now call helicopter parenting. And that stage of development would get broken. Um, they know some of these things literally from written records, from the nannies, from the caretakers, from the um, sometimes even the wet nurses. Everybody, especially with the princes, kept notes. They didn't keep notes, at least in the most of the Western cultures. They didn't keep notes with the second son, unless it was important. Broken bone mended. Literally, there was very much. In Asian cultures, it was. It seems they kept lot more notes. I don't know how much of that was part of this a long time ago. I don't know. Anyway, so I'm listening to this and here, oh, this really interesting. The key part about this was that stage of development I was talking about, where you don't let them go through the problem solving, happened very frequently in noble families, especially royal ones, especially because they were protecting family jewels, literally. And because of that, the note showed later through life, as the developmental process continued, firstborn sons had what was sometimes called the noble condition, or in some areas the royal condition. They were kind of clumsy, awkward physically. Um, Not really bad, not horribly, just they were not confident of their movements. And it was attributed to this developmental stage issue. All right, so imagine you are let's back up. Let's back up a little bit. The children from about birth to around 6, 7, 8 years old, depending on the child, depending on the development of the child, um, would be completely caretaken by a team. Notes. Everybody knew exactly. They were there not just to make sure and caretake um, of that prince, um, but they were also at security. So any damage that happened, you couldn't get around it. So they were not going to let that happen. So these developmental stages were interrupted, and people got very clumsy. And this is seen frequently in today's society, more and more frequently. Um, Developmental psychology people, developmental process people, if I'm wrong, hit me. Nail me to the wall on this if I'm wrong. If I'm right, tell me where I am. If I'm incorrect or a little bit right and a little bit wrong, both please. I want to make sure I get this right. Um, I'm just not really willing to study it that hard. It's just an idea. So, but I do want to get it right. I'm sitting in my RV and okay. So they would have to work around these issues when raising the prince up. So you have a clumsy prince. Just imagine in your head, not a buffoon, not buffoon is a performer, but somebody who genuinely just uh, has just slightly awkward. Not they're not confident of their body skills or emotions, and it just you can see it. They avoid movement, not at all costs. They just avoid movement. There, most people like this are usually still sometimes a little overweight. In today's society, greatly. But what would happen is around 8 years old, 9 years old, the child starts to become kind of aware. Oh, wait, there's a world. Oh, interesting. More just on all of a sudden the input phase, and then so well, the input phase was always going on, but just now it's a little more connected. And around this time, you had a prince that needed to be prepared for royal society, not just for royal society, but to possibly lead a country. So imagine you have as the king or as the queen or whoever, their task is to prepare that prince for the future. Whatever that future is, that prince needs to be prepared. You don't want a clumsy buffoon being around. It's representative of your country. So there would be teams of people to teach these kids skills. They're kids. Usually, the first skill they learned, now the skills they're going to be learning are adapted to their life, their home life, their presence, their surroundings, their environment, everything that's going to be needed to make them a successful person in that noble class. They're already at the top just by fact of birth. They're there. But they have to match it. They have to be what that is. So they get taught it. Imagine you're one of the persons, the people, who is instructed. Queen comes to you and says, Sir Anthony, you're to prepare my son for royal society. You're to prepare him to be a king. Uh, yes, my queen? You don't just do your best on this, you get it right. So these people existed. They existed. They, we would now call them kind of like coordinators, probably something what I imagine in today's easy to identify was a coordinator who gets an actor physically prepared for a role. Guy who played not Oliver Queen, the guy who played Stephen Amell, the guy who played Green Arrow or Arrow. His team coordinated all the things he was going to need to be able to do to satisfy this role. Got him trained on it. So that's kind of at a very different style what would have been needed back then. All right, so back to the Prince thing. Now, in some countries, probably not many. In some countries, an instructor uh, could do back then what negative discipline or hard discipline or very tedious uh, things, um, and get away with it. not with a prince. So you can't tell a prince sometimes. Some societies you could, and some cultures you could, but in most of them, you just it would be difficult as I imagine as a subject of the king and queen and everything to your highness is wrong. Don't do it that way. That's not a thing. That you can't do that. Um, so this was probably the first time, well, not the first time, but the first recognized or observed time that praise the success, ignore the fault or the not success was used. Um, some cases successfully, some cases not. But there it is. So you would have some of these prints. So like let's say you're coordinator. One of the first tasks you kids got to do is got to sit at the table with the adults. That's where most society kind of starts or ends up. But world society, you got to be thinking world society, not now. Back then. So they would prepare the table setting, and you've seen them, Downton Abbey. They would prepare that. They got to make sure this world kid is skilled with everything in that place. They got to make sure that the kid can have a conversation and reach for whichever glass or fork or knife or spoon without breaking conversation or without breaking eye contact. They'll be taught the eye contact too. Without, and of course, because like in Downton Abbey, the front here was paper, literally. Even back then, it's paper. You can't bend or do like this, so your whole body is like this. You have to practice in this position. Yeah, they did. So that would be one of the first skills they'd work on. What other skills would a world lad need to learn? Billiards, maybe. Sailing, yachting, swordplay, sword fighting, everything. Somebody has got to work the kid up from clumsy to potentially successful warrior if necessary. Further back you go, the more necessary, or more closer you get to the future. If you were going to need to use your sword closer to now, you were pretty much done for anyway. You had mobs and bombs and stuff, so more than 500 years ago, I'm thinking. So you have from clumsy kid, successful potential warrior, or at least leader, maybe not even warrior, but at the very least confident leader. And you've got, what would you do? What would you set up? What kind of course of action? And considering hit principles, let's say you could throw that in there. What kind of training system would you set up to do that? That kind of concept is what I based how I put everything together. Um, that was kind of where I got the conglomeration of the skills to use doing things that are practical, your environment, um, things that you do, things that you need to do, and things you always want to improve and master. And that's the key part is to have mastery of your own environment. If you're going to have a functional system, you want you and your surroundings, your environment, you want that masterful. That's kind of the idea there, and then different stages above that. So, um, in the future, I'll talk more about possibly different stages of this idea that could be used. I'm not saying this is a concept. I'm just trying to meet the requirements that that I can identify are involved with something like this from the sources of information I discussed previously. Um, Critical factors of practicing conditioning, also known as music and dance. And I have the new one. Oh, I liked it. Um, and um, Exercise versus recreation. I can't remember if that has the definition of exercise. Um, I still cringe at clinical environment, but anyway. Uh, um, so I think, as far as I can tell, that's all I missed was the clinical environment. If anything else was there, I don't know. Uh, I hope this kind of shed some light on how I put that together, where it came from, where the germ for it was. Um, it also came from working around in clinical environments, physical therapy, occupational therapy, cardio rehab, um, and occasion. I did get the occasion to, I want to say occasion, I want to say honor to observe, and this was before HIPAA, to observe some physical therapy with some paraplegic um, subjects, patients, um, with a couple of, I can't remember if it was coma, there induced coma, and then there was one that was persistent vegetative state at the time. Um, so anyway, some of the observations I got from there also are kind of included in that concept. Little bit of everything kind of jumbled together, but the whole idea is to build first, of course, strength. Um, if you build strength properly, the flexibility and endurance will kind of come along with it. Like I said, if you build it properly, that's a key part. I'm just not even going to get into the rest of the properly part. I'll let Drew and everybody do that. I like to play. So I hope this kind of helps. I'm not going to sell it. If somebody wants to sell it, that's fine. It's just an idea. I appreciate you, anybody who listened all this way, especially with me hitting on my Delta 8. Anyway, um, I'm doing good. Got my next radiation for tomorrow, and oh yeah, I shaved my beard, mostly just because I was in the ER for a little bit, and I was uncomfortable with the beard. And I'm like, it may happen again, so I'm getting prepared for that. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. Thanks.